Maybe I will.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
a good send off.
Yeah. Right. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
All right, just kind of give it a couple more seconds. All righty. All right. Welcome, everyone. 9th day of the New York State Craft Brewers Conference presented by DWS. My name is Jen Myers, and I will be the moderator for this session. Welcome to Wastewater Management, presented by James Hotchkies from Enereau and Alec Distler from Champlin. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, likewise.
Before we begin, just a couple things. If you have any questions, feel free to put your questions in chat or use the hand emoji. We'll call on you throughout the session. If you wouldn't mind signing the attendee session sheet, we're trying to keep track. And a big thank you to our sponsors. Today's Thursday presenting sponsor is Whiteman, Osterman, and Hannah. And our Thursday session sponsors are Micromatic, Schaefer Container Systems, and Eco Software. So big thanks to our allies for making this possible. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to both Alec and James.
Yeah, so Alec and I have decided to try and do this as a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
Who's on first? One of those questions, right? So Alec is going to actually manage the deck, the slide deck, and bring him up. So Alec, if you want to.
Yeah, sure thing. Let's work on this guy, share the screen there. And that means I need to start my slideshow.
There we go.
So we will start from the beginning. Okay, is that looking good for everyone?
Sure does.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect. Just want to make sure that we're actually seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, yeah, so like I said, I'm Alec, and this is James, or Jim, and we're both in the water and wastewater world. So we wanted to go through and give you guys a little educational lesson on wastewater at your brewery. So let's just start her off.
Okay, first a little bit of a background. So again, welcome everybody. Jim Hotchkies here. I have a little company called Enereau Systems Group. We're based in Fort Erie, Ontario, which for those of you that are not from the Buffalo area and probably have never heard of Fort Erie, is right across the river from Buffalo. So we're actually our shop is like 200 yards from the Peace Bridge, but yeah, so we're almost on the border. We focus on advanced membrane technologies such as membrane bioreactors for wastewater and for water. We also focus on a very narrow niche of industries, food and beverage, mostly craft breweries, boutique wineries, as well as some land or hotels, resorts, small office buildings. We bring about 35 years of experience in this industry to Enereau. It's a global experience. Craig, who runs the company with me, and I both have lived in North America, Europe. I've lived down in Australia, New Zealand for a while. We've done a lot of projects. It's very small, all the way up to 100 million gallons per day for municipal projects. Recently, since we've started Enereau, we've built systems for wineries and breweries in New York, California, Pennsylvania, Ontario, and the UK, as well as resorts in California, Washington, and the British Virgin Islands. So that's a little bit of a background on who we are. Alec?
Great. So yeah, and then we're Champlin Associates. We're a pumps and controls company. We're based in Essex, Vermont, kind of up near Burlington, if you know where that is. But we service all of New England and beyond. We go all the way down to, Pennsylvania, Maryland for certain projects. But we are pumps and controls guys. For the main part, we do a lot of work with municipalities. So we deal with a lot of the regulatory side of things that come into brewing on there. But we've recently been getting into water and wastewater treatment. And so we rep a number of different treatment systems here for high strength wastewater as well. But yeah, we do everything, from pH adjustment to pumps to treatment and everything in between that you could possibly think of. But yeah, so we service all of New England. So if you guys ever have any pumps questions or anything like that, feel free to give us a call as well. Okay, so brewery wastewater. What's the big deal? So what's the big deal about, wastewater coming out of your brewery? It feels like, it's just beer, yeast, hops, some other stuff. It's not like you're dumping a bunch of harmful chemicals down the drain. And, plus just want to brew beer. We're not interested, and you guys frankly don't have the time for managing your wastewater as well. And I know while these thoughts are totally understandable, the creation of wastewater is part of the brewing process, and it's important for brewers to know the basics of wastewater because frankly, you guys create a lot of it. In order to understand the impact a brewery has on its town's wastewater treatment plants or its private leach field and why so many regulations are put on breweries, we need to understand some basics about wastewater and how it's treated. So, wastewater at treatment plants and for leach fields are typically measured in two main factors. You have flow and biological oxygen demand, or BOD. Flow is simply the amount of wastewater produced, and it's typically measured in gallons per day, while BOD is a measurement of organics in water. So you can think of it how strong your wastewater is. A good way of thinking about BOD is as food for biological organisms. These organisms that live in your municipal wastewater treatment plant or septic system need food and oxygen to survive. So if too much food, BOD, is introduced in your wastewater, the organisms will reproduce too quickly, consume all the oxygen in that system, and die, killing the entire plant. So for reference, residential strength sewer, the stuff that's coming out of your house and toilets, is measured at about 300 milligrams per liter of BOD. So wastewater basics, how to measure it. Wastewater treatment plants have a design capacity for both that flow and the BOD. These two metrics work together to derive how many pounds of BOD a day the plant can handle. To find out your BODs per day, you take your flow in millions per gallon per day, multiplied by your average BOD, multiplied by 8.34, and that gives you your pounds of BOD a day. So we see here that a 1 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant designed for an influent BOD of 300 milligrams per liter, which is that regular residential level, has a treatment capacity of about 2,500 pounds of BOD a day. Now that sounds like a lot, but now let's look at some brewery examples here. So pounds of BOD per day is often how towns measure the wastewater of waste producers as well. So looking at this brewery example, if Brad's Brewery discharges 5,000 gallons per day of wastewater at about 5,000 milligrams per liter of BOD, with that calculation we just talked about, they're producing about 208.5 pounds of BOD a day. In comparison, your average residential home produces only about half a pound of BOD a day. That means that Brad's Brewery equates to about 417 homes worth of their wastewater treatment capacities. Now we're starting to see why breweries are a target for municipal regulations. And that Brad Brewery's example isn't out of the ordinary. So let's look at some wastewater coming out of your average brewery. We see nationally that 2 to 8 gallons of wastewater are produced for every gallon of beer. And if your brewery has great process control, you may fall between 2 to 4 gallons of wastewater per beer, but most breweries fall between 4 to 6 gallons produced, and those with very poor process controls can go above 15 gallons of wastewater for every gallon of beer that you're brewing. For BOD, typically breweries fall between 3,000 to 7,000 milligrams per liter of BOD on average, with great process control being as low as 2,500 milligrams per liter and very poor process control averaging over 15,000 milligrams per liter of BOD, which when you put it in that calculation that we're just looking at, equates to an insane amount of poundage of BOD, which equates to a lot of that wastewater treatment capacity being taken up. So for reference, pure beer can be measured at over 65,000 milligrams per liter of BOD, which means that 1 gallon of beer equates to about half a pound of BOD, which we just saw is the same amount as a single residential home. So brewery wastewater is some pretty potent stuff. But what's the typical response to brewery wastewater by municipalities? One big response that we're hearing is to tax them into submission. In order to protect themselves from industries dumping all their waste down the drain and overloading their wastewater treatment plant, many towns are starting to implement high-strength wastewater surcharge fees. And these fees are typically based on the pounds of BOD sent to the plant and can easily cost a brewery tens of thousands of dollars a year. We've seen them for over $150,000 a year, $10,000 a month. They can become astronomical really quick. Other times, municipalities may not even take your wastewater at all if it's over a certain BOD threshold. Typically, we see that around 300. It depends on your municipality, so you'll need to be in contact with your local town and whatever your governing ordinance is to see what those levels are. But if your municipality isn't letting you dump down the drain, that means that these breweries are you're being forced to pay someone to haul all of your wastewater to a different location, different wastewater treatment plant that will actually accept your wastewater. And that's going to be some astronomical hauling fees if you're hauling just about everything that you make away. So now what? All of that probably sounds like some really bad news so far, and you're probably asking, great, I know I have a problem. How do I fix it? And that's a great question. So there are two main things you can do to bring down your BOD right now, is Sidestreaming and pretreatment. So every single brewery should be using sidestream practices, regardless of their size. Sidestreaming is just the process of taking process waste from different brewing stages and removing it from the waste stream. This includes any practice that reduces the volume of process water generated or keeps high-strength waste out of the process wastewater. That includes the separation, collection, or removal of high-strength solids like your spent grains, high-strength liquids like spilled beer, and first rinses, and taking this collected waste offsite for reuse or disposal, whether it be like compost, feed to pigs, maybe a digester or something like that. By separating and collecting high-strength solids, your spent grains, mash tun, trub, yeast, and liquid, your first rinse, keg dumps, spilled product for offsite disposal, you can significantly reduce the BOD of your wastewater. Oftentimes, though, side streaming isn't enough to avoid those high-strength waste fees. Even with great side streaming that we see, you're probably hanging around that 2,500 milligram per liter BOD mark if you're very good at your side streaming. So side streaming might not be enough to meet your regulatory standards or to keep your septic system from getting overloaded. In that case, you need to start looking at some pretreatment systems. So now that you have the basics of wastewater down, kind of flew through that, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Jim from Enereau to talk about sustainability and pretreatment.
First, I'll take myself off of mute. Okay, so as Alec asked right up front, why are we doing this? Why are we treating brewery wastewater? Well, apart from the topics that Alec covered, it is the environmentally responsible thing to do for any high strength, potentially hazardous wastewater. And what's coming out of the brewery, again, as Alec indicated, is very high strength and potentially hazardous to the sewage treatment plants. And also because of some of the pH levels that you're seeing coming out of breweries, it can be very corrosive to the sewer lines, or very damaging to the wastewater treatment plant when it gets there. What we've seen are, it's a well-designed and a well-managed and operated wastewater treatment system can actually give you a decent ROI on your investment. Certainly if you're offsetting sewer surcharges or limits on what you can actually haul off-site. Cost of non-compliance is unsustainable. Alec mentioned the surcharges. We see the same numbers all over the place. We've seen breweries that have been told they have to shut down because they're no longer able to send their waste anywhere. And if you're in a rural area, it doesn't take long for a couple of gallons of brewery waste to completely destroy a septic tank. So they don't work on brewery waste. So non-compliance is no longer an option. Next. You're managing the slideshow, I think? Yeah, there we go. So, like most of us, we can bury our head in the sands and hope that the problem will simply go away. But that's unlikely to happen. So it's not going to be a simple solution just to turn your back on it. So we need to start embracing wastewater management as a critical part of the business. You're making a product, you have to deal with the waste that's associated with that product, just like any other industry. Next. As Alec also indicated, the breweries are extremely liberal in terms of their water consumption. We have seen breweries that are over 10-1. I think the best managed brewery in the world is probably Carlsberg right now. That's around 2.4 liters of water per liter of beer, but most are in that sort of mid 5 to 6 range. Characteristics, if you're doing a caustic rinse, you're going to have pHs of as high as 11 or 12. I've seen some breweries that are over 12. Your acid sanitizers, that'll pull you down to less than 3 in some cases. Alec mentioned the BOD, which is probably the one element beyond suspended solids that the local municipalities will come after you on. COD, chemical oxygen demand, is usually not a factor on regulatory compliance, but it can have a significant impact on how to treat the waste in your system, because typically COD to BOD is around 2-1, but if you have a lot of cleaners in your wastewater, it can get up to 3, 4, 5-1 or higher. And then your total suspended solids may be as much as your BOD in concentration, and that can really plug up the sewer lines. Next. But the first step is don't rush out and buy a wastewater treatment system. There are dozens of wastewater treatment systems on the market. Very few are actually designed for craft breweries. Most wastewater treatment systems on the market are essentially designed for sanitary wastewater. And dealing with a wastewater stream that's 10 to 20 times stronger than sanitary wastewater has a big impact on what kind of wastewater treatment system you buy, but also on the nature of the wastewater treatment system and the system size in itself. The first thing you need to do is figure out what is actually in your wastewater stream. Next. So before you go out and talk to wastewater companies or consultants, it's really valuable to do a deep dive on your operations. What's in your wastewater? Where are you using water in your operation? How much are you using at each stage? Do you have hoses that are just running open? I went out to a brewery in Oregon a couple of years back, and basically was wading through 2 inches of water because of a fire hose size hose that was just sending water all over the floor of the brewery. Plus, everything that was in that stream got flushed down the sewer. What's in your wastewater? Alec mentioned BOD and TSS, but it's also important to actually measure COD, the pH, obviously, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and the total dissolved solids, because they all have an impact on how you treat those wastewater streams. Where can you eliminate some of your waste or your water usage? If you have open hoses, that's a tremendous drain on the system, pardon the pun. Do you really have to flush everything down the drain? What are your resource metrics? Water to beer ratio. Alec mentioned Sidestreaming, critically important on everything. And then what are your associated costs? So if you're going to eventually look at a wastewater treatment system, how does that offset the cost of what you're paying? For some very, very small operations, it may be that it's worth hauling your waste for a couple of years until you grow in size, and then come back and revisit the wastewater treatment system side of the business. Next. I don't need to tell you, you probably know better than I do, but every time I talk to a brewer, he takes telling me he doesn't actually brew beer, he cleans. 90% of what he does is cleaning tanks and fermenters and everything. So if that's what you're doing, what are you actually putting down the drain? In many cases, it's not beer. It may be spent caustic. It may be peracetic acid. It may be cleaners. So figure out what are you actually putting down the drain. Some stuff doesn't belong down the drain. Like, don't put off-spec beer down the drain. As Alec indicated, one beer is pretty much the same as a house. So if it's off-spec beer, do something else with it. Or if you have to put it down the drain, meter it into the drain and don't just pour it down, because that will overload anything it hits. If it isn't a liquid, try sweeping it up. Like a hose is probably the worst environmental unit in a brewery, because you spill something on the floor, you get a hose with a big nozzle on it and you flush it down the drain. Go get a broom. The cheapest thing you do is go buy a $3 whisk broom and sweep it up, not put it down the drain. Segregate whatever goes down the drain. What wastewater is essentially pure H2O plus whatever you put in it. If you want to minimize the impact on the environment, it's a lot easier to take whatever you put in that stream out before it goes down as a wastewater stream. So like spent caustics, instead of putting spent caustic down the drain, can you recover the spent caustic and recycle it more and more frequently? Alec mentioned the Sidestreaming. So again, there's no point in putting it down the drain. Spent grains do not biodigest very well. Yeasts do not biodigest very well. Trub, a little bit better than most, but if it's a very low digestible material, it's often better to segregate it and have it hauled off as animal feed, as opposed to putting it down the drain where it's almost impossible to treat. Try and develop a true cost and value of your effluent streams. What are you losing down that stream in terms of water and the energy to treat that water? So, there's a value there's a cost to treating wastewater. What chemicals are you consuming? What labor is involved in that? What are your disposal fees to get rid of it? So then we start to look at what's the potential value of what's in the stream. Can we recover energy or minimize energy? Can we recover spent caustics? Can we actually recycle the water? In many cases, if you're dealing with processed wastewater from a brewery, it's non-pathogenic. So it's not hazardous to most mankind. So in many cases, you can actually recover that water and reuse it for non-product applications. Though in some cases, there are a number of breweries around the world that have been trialing used or wastewater generated beers quite successfully. And so maybe in the future, we'll see recycled beer or recycled water in beer. Next. So as Alec indicated earlier, the first step, once you go through all of the steps to minimize your waste stream, and you come to the conclusion that while we've done everything we can, we still have relatively high BOD, we still have TSS issues and pH issues. The first step is primary treatment, which is basically, how do I intersect the non or poorly biodegradable solids? So can I screen those out? There's some things that definitely should not go down the drain, including bottle caps and smashed glass, and but also stuff that you might normally put down the drain, like grains and yeast. But can you capture those and pull them out of the stream before it becomes a wastewater stream? So it becomes a solid to deal with, a solid waste, or a solid byproduct that you can get rid of to a farm or some other application. Equalization is very important, particularly with craft breweries, because you do have different types of waste that come down the drain over the course of a day or from day to day. Like you may have highly caustic rinse waters for one period of time, followed by highly acidic wastewaters for another period of time, and then cleaners or just who knows what's in there. So if you can put in an equalization tank, it helps balance out those variations. So not only does it help for the waste stream going down the drain, but if you do have an in-house wastewater treatment system, they work much better on a balanced or equalized stream than on a highly variable stream. So we like to recommend around 12 to 18 hours of retention time in an equalization chamber. That can significantly reduce the cost of pH adjustment because they will self-neutralize if you have caustic wastes that are followed by acidic wastes before you actually start to put in a lot of chemicals to adjust them. If you have highly caustic waste coming in, then the pH meter will start to send in lots of acid to neutralize it. Vice versa, if you have a lot of acidic waste coming in, it'll send in a lot of caustic to neutralize it. If you provide time for them to self-neutralize, your consumption of reagents goes down quite dramatically. That does require a fairly good pH system with a probe that you clean relatively frequently. You know, you don't just stick the probe in there and come back a year later and figure it's still accurate. So you do need to maintain those things. And take a look at what chemicals are you putting down there that can inhibit treatment. Soaps, detergents, sanitizers do not biologically degrade very easily. So if you are going to use soaps, which you do have to use, try to find soaps that are not high foaming, and don't use copious quantities of soaps when you don't need them. Because if it gets into the wastewater treatment plant, which typically is a biological system, has a lot of air going into it to satisfy the BOD, it's like pouring dish detergent into a hot tub. It will foam, so be careful about that. Next. So that's the pre-treatment that pretty well every craft brewery should be putting in. And most regulatory officers, the first thing they look at will be pH. So then they'll look at BOD, and then they may look at TSS. If you have a pretty good pH adjustment system and you're getting your side streaming in line, you may be able to get by with just some primary treatment for a period of time, or at least indicate that you're on the path to developing something that is more appropriate. Sooner rather than later, you will probably have to get into some sort of advanced biological treatment. You're dealing with organic material. Basically, it's organic food. And just like your body, you have a biological digestion system that will break down the organic materials that come down from the brewery. And so almost all wastewater treatment systems that are going to breweries are a biological system. If it's an extremely large brewery, like an Anheuser-Busch or a big Carlsberg plant or something, they may be anaerobic digestion systems where you're capturing the methane to reuse as fuel. But those types of technologies are very unsuitable for most craft breweries. Essentially, they're a time bomb if you don't run them properly, because you are creating very volatile gases in these systems. So we don't recommend them for pretty well any craft brewery anywhere in the world. And so most likely you're going to get into an advanced biological treatment system. It could be a fixed film, like a trickling filter type system, attached growth, which you might come across the name moving bed bioreactor or rotary biological contactors, or a suspended growth, which is a typical activated sludge type system. Almost every municipal wastewater treatment plant in the world is and a suspended growth type facility. So it's the activated sludge type basis. And that's the basis of most of the systems that we do. So you have a biological process that is just like the digestion system that you have in your body. It consumes the organic material that's going in there. It converts those organic materials into oxygen, nitrogen, dead cell matter. Like your body, it doesn't just exist on eating steak alone. You know, you do need your veggies, and you need your fruits, and you need your fats and your greases. And so apart from the food, the carbon material that's coming down the drain, you do need to make sure that you have the right nutrient balance, particularly ammonia, nitrogen, and phosphorus. These basic biological treatment systems are very well proven, they're very well understood, and they're very easy to get certified or permitted by the regulatory authorities. They understand them. The processes have been around for 100 years, so the biological processes have. And so, you know, most regulatory authorities will permit them fairly quickly once they get the process calculations and they're happy that the system is the right size for the flow. With today's advanced technologies, it's possible to bring your BOD down by 98% or more, and bring the total suspended solids down to less than 5 milligrams per liter, and keep the pH in around a neutral level. Next. However, now that's putting the system in. So these are not systems, I need to stress this, that you put in and you turn it on and you walk away and never come back. Yeah, it is a mechanical system working on a living biomass. A biological system is a living biomass. So it does need to be monitored for biological health. So what are you sending in there on a daily basis? You know, what's the BOD, the COD, what temperature it's coming in at? You know, what's the dissolved oxygen concentration? What is your food to nutrient balance? Typically, most biological systems like a balance of 100 to 5 to 1 of carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus. So if you got a lot of beer coming in there and you don't have very much nutrients, you might have to add some nutrients to keep that balance in line. Most sanitary wastewater is already balanced, but processed wastewater from food and beverage operations can quite often get out of balance, and that's where you need to add some nutrients, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes less frequently. You know, what are the key performance indicators in your particular operation? You know, what is your actual flow versus design flow? You know, if the system is designed for 20 gallons per minute and you're actually trying to treat 40 gallons per minute, it may not have enough residence time. On the other hand, if you're designed for 20 and you only have 2, then maybe you don't have enough food in there to keep the biomass active. So, you know, you need to keep an eye on things like flow and how to change the system if the flow goes up or flow goes down. If you have membranes in there, you know, what is the flux, which is the gallons per day through a square foot of membrane? You know, how is that changing? You know, as membrane gets dirtier, it's like your filter on your swimming pool. The pressure starts to go up. So you have to monitor the pressure on the membrane. When it gets too high, you clean the membranes. Obviously, what's the effluent quality? You know, so periodically or regularly, in some cases, you have to send samples out for BOD analysis, TSS, COD. Sometimes they will require sampling on total nitrogen and total phosphorus. Usually nitrogen first. Phosphorus is very sensitive areas. If you're going into a very sensitive aquatic environment, then they may be checking for phosphorus, but most likely they'll check for total nitrogen first. And then, you know, maintenance on equipment. You know, there are a lot of mechanical systems there, screens and strainers to remove the non-biodegradable solids. typically a lot of pumps and aeration systems, which is something that Alec at Champlin knows a lot about. Valves and fittings, so most of these systems have true union valves, which means that those true unions can work themselves loose if they're on a vibrating piece of equipment. So rather than wait till the water is pouring out of a true union, check it on a daily basis or every couple of days, make sure the unions are tight. And then the membranes do require cleaning. It's like any other filter, whether it's in your car, in your air conditioner, or in your wastewater treatment plant, the filters need to get cleaned. So operations and maintenance, it is an important part of the process. Obviously it's not as exciting as making the beer. That's what you're in business to do. That's the revenue side of the business. This is the cost side of the business, which is a necessary evil if you want to be in the revenue side of the business. So you do need to have people that understand how to maintain this type of equipment, whether it's your own staff or whether you contract out for someone to come in once a week, once a month, once a quarter, or if it's a big enough operation, a full-time operator. Most craft breweries do not need a full-time operator, but they do need to have someone that comes in periodically to make sure that the system is continuing to work as it was designed. Next. Back to you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so, in summary, brewery wastewater is not a joke, and it's important to know the basics, basic knowledge about your wastewater, because you guys create a lot of it. Also, municipalities are starting to crack down on breweries specifically. So the time to start addressing your wastewater really was a while ago, but at least now. And you guys really need to understand, as Jim was saying, try to understand your wastewater as well as you can. And if you guys need help with that, monitoring or sampling or whatever, give us a call at Champlin. We're happy to, walk you through what that might look like. Sidestream. If you're not sidestreaming your solids and your high strength liquids, just start doing that ASAP. The quickest and least expensive way to cut down on your BOD output. Also, get in touch with your local municipalities, see what they're looking for. We've seen places where pH is the thing that they're most worried about. So maybe you can get away with just a pH adjustment system, something like that. Or equalization and timing your emptying of your tanks there. Maybe we've seen places where breweries were able to put in EQ tanks and empty their waste at night while the wastewater treatment plant is being less impacted from normal day-to-day use. So try to get as best a relationship as you can with your local municipality. And if you still need some high strength wastewater treatment systems, start looking into a pretreatment system that would actually work at your facility. And if good housekeeping is not enough and advanced treatments necessary, give us a call at Champlin or give Enereau a call. We're happy to see what your system's like and help you find a wastewater treatment system that's right for you. And some of the benefits of the stuff that we provide, you treat your high strength better than the competition and get it up to that 98% removal or greater if you need that. It can be paired with existing treatment systems. If you have something out there now, we can upgrade that or reinvent that. The technologies that we provide are both scalable and modular. They're simple to maintain, and they're both economical in terms of CAPEX and OPEX. Let's see. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. Both Enereau and Champlin are here to help you guys out with whatever your wastewater treatment needs are. Feel free to contact us with any questions you may have. We're happy to talk about whatever your wastewater problems are. And I hope this session was helpful to you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them out. Jim and I would be happy to give a stab at whatever you got going on.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, James. We do have a question for you guys from Brian. Brian, go ahead. Brian, are you still there? Okay, so his question was, do any of your systems work well with antimicrobial sanitizers such as PAA for water treatment purposes?
Well, yes. If we know, again, that comes back to
Mhm.
identifying what is actually in the stream. If you do have sanitizers coming down, which with most breweries you do, we can definitely identify what sort of pre-treatment is required for any type of chemical coming into the system. If we don't know what's coming into the system, then we play catch up downstream, trying to get the biology to live with whatever it's seeing. So the more that we know upfront in terms of what are all the different chemicals that are likely to come into the system, the better we are able to put in the pre-treatment or even meter in some of the chemicals so that they don't have a negative impact on the biology. So, one of the things that is very important when we're designing an advanced treatment system is to get our hands on the MSDS sheets that you have at the brewery, so we can take a look through and see if there's anything in there that could inhibit a biological process, and then discuss that up front, or look at, or we would even talk to the chemical supplier to find out what they have that might mitigate the impact of that particular chemical on a biological system.
Awesome, thank you. Is there any more questions? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Alec and James. Thank you to our allied members, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks,
appreciate the time.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thanks guys. Have a great conference.
Bye now.